Man, man, oh man. My question is this: when is the craziest conference realignment story, situation, scenario, whatever you want to call it? When is it going to end, and how is it going to end? Because I don't know. And every day I hear something different. Every day I hear something different. And today was a big one, guys. Today was a big one. And a lot of people were reporting it, including ESPN themselves. So the biggest news, the latest news that I heard, and I already did a video on it, was ESPN comes out and says they're not even close to a TV deal with the Pac-12. What? Oh man, that. Here's the thing. We've been hearing that if the Pac-12 gets a TV deal, it's going to be streaming heavy, right? We already know that. If ESPN is out, does this mean that this is going to be streaming only? That would be awful. I don't see the Pac-12 surviving off that. Anyways, guys, welcome back to Golden Blue Dude. We're back in the studio. How about that? We're back in the studio. We took a weekend visit to our family up there in West Virginia. Did a live show in the studio of my brother-in-law up there. He actually has a lot more equipment up there, so appreciated him helping us out. And it was a good live show. But it's always good to be back home. I always miss my studio whenever I'm doing a live show. How's everybody doing this evening? Real quick, let's do an audio check. Can y'all hear me? Give me a thumbs up or a yes or a thumbs down or a no if you can't hear me. Just let me know. Give me 1 second here. There we go. All right, there we go. Can you hear me? Can you not? Let me know in the comments. That way I know if I need to do something going forward. We've had a very active, month and a half, really. Great weekend, great week. Set a new record. So just to give y'all an idea on the normality of here at Golden Blue, it differs from YouTube channel to YouTube channel. But here at Golden Blue Dude, views in the past 48 hours, the normal in the off season is about 15,000 to 20,000 in a 48-hour time span. And that's a decent day, not a great day. Well, for the past, 4 or 5 days, that 48-hour time slot, we have been hitting the 70,000 mark. And this is the off season. So for Golden Blue Dude, 70,000 views in 48 hours, that's boom month numbers right there. And we're in freaking March. So I have been totally blown away. This Pac-12 story has really blown up, and I appreciate everybody supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. If we have a moderator in the chat, for whatever reason, the stream is doing it again. It's not showing me the count. So if we have Yvette or Joey in the chat, give me a number in the chat because I can't keep up with that now. I don't know why it does that, but it does do that. And the chat's not updating either. I'm actually starting to wonder if I'm live or not. Y'all need to let me know if I'm actually live or not because it's not showing anything. What happened? Just give me a thumbs up in the chat. Let me know that you can hear me. Can you hear me? Well, if I don't get a response, I might have to restart this thing. This is not making any sense at all. Give me 1 second, guys. Hold on. There we go. Let's try this again. Now we're good. Now I'm seeing everything. Now I'm seeing the chat. Now I'm seeing the number. I don't know what was going on, guys. I don't. So I hit refresh, jumped out, jumped back in. Awesome. So now I can see your comments. Now I can see how many's in the chat. And this whole time, you guys were telling me that you could hear. Seriously, the comments were not updating. So I was wondering, am I talking to nobody? What's going on here? So now I see like 5 chats that said I can hear you. Thank you, StreamYard. You make me look like an idiot. Anyways. Golden Blue having a great week. Well above our average as far as views. In fact, we're breaking records. We're very excited about this because we're in a period where we shouldn't be getting very much views at all, and we're setting records. So it doesn't get much better than that. So appreciate everybody that stops by and supports Golden Blue. We wouldn't be having the success that we're having without you guys. So special shout out to you guys. Live show tonight, of course, is going to be about the Pac-12 as well. There were a lot of surprises in the big dance. We're going to talk about that more tomorrow before the second week of March Madness kicks off. 15 seed Princeton in the second round. I was kind of bummed that Farley Dickinson didn't get past the second round and didn't get into the Sweet 16, but that's okay. We still have a Cinderella story going on with Princeton. All right, so make sure to hit the like button if you haven't already. Let's see, what all did I forget because I was so focused on the stinking StreamYard not updating. Oh, yes, if you have a question, comment, troll attempt, or a correction, maybe I said something incorrectly and you want to point it out because people like to do it all the time. And a great way to support the channel is the Super Chat button. It's that little dollar sign that you see on the bottom right-hand corner. Anything you put in that Super Chat is going to go right on the screen, right where you see Golden Blued. And I'll read it and we'll address it. And it's a great way to support the channel because, like I've said many times, us college football YouTubers, we always appreciate those donations. But in the off season, we appreciate it just a little bit more because it turns into the grind. I've been blessed because February and March hasn't been that big of a grind because we're getting views like crazy. But, you know, those donations still help, and we greatly appreciate it. So Pac-12, you know, I'm still hearing two sides of the story, though, because I have another individual who, you know, wishes to remain anonymous, says that he has a source inside of Utah that's saying that a deal will be done. They are having a meeting. They're only adding 2 teams, and it's going to be SMU and San Diego State. And check this out. So, according to him, he's saying that SMU and San Diego State, they're going to get $25 million apiece. And then the other 10 remaining schools are going to get $33 million apiece. Okay, so if ESPN hadn't come out today and said they're not close to a deal with Pac-12, it would be very believable. I mean, it would be more than what I expected, but it would at least be believable because the new additions are taking a cut. The old teams, 33, that's enough for everybody to stay, and the Pac-12 lives to see another day, and it's a little bit more than the Big 12, about $1.5 million a year more than the Big 12. But the issue that I have with those numbers now is the fact that ESPN came out today and said we're not even close to a deal with the Pac-12. That's the one that really, you know, kind of throws a monkey wrench into those numbers. Any numbers, really, if you think about it. If ESPN is not a part of the deal, how do teams stay? Because if ESPN is not a part of the deal, then that literally means that this media rights deal is streaming only. That's the question that I want to ask you guys. Let's take into consideration everything that we've heard, right? Especially today. ESPN coming out and saying we're not even close to a deal with Pac-12. Okay. So if that's the case, which I don't know why ESPN would lie about ESPN, but who knows? You never know. If that's the case, then that would mean that this deal is going to be not only heavy streaming, but streaming exclusively. So my question is this. If all that's true, ESPN is not close, and let's say they go 100% streaming, is that good enough for everybody to stay in the Pac-12? I don't see it. I really don't see it unless this is some sort of. I don't know why ESPN would come out and say that if it's not true. I don't know. I don't know. but maybe it's some kind of stunt that ESPN is pulling. Who knows? And they're trying to fool everybody. And they do have a deal with the Pac-12, and it's, that number that I shouted out earlier. A guy says he knows some inside sources with Utah, and they're saying $25 million apiece for San Diego State and SMU, and then the rest of the teams get $33 million. I'm not saying that's incorrect. All I'm saying is it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. And the biggest thing that people say about the Pac-12 is ESPN wants the Pac-12 to continue to exist because of the Pac-12 After Dark. That's incorrect. ESPN just needs content for that time slot, whether it's the Pac-12 After Dark, whether it's the Big 12 After Dark, whether it's the Big 10 After Dark. It doesn't matter what the title is. As long as they have decent matchups for that time slot, it doesn't matter what conference it's coming out of. So if we're looking at a streaming exclusively deal and it's not good enough for these teams in the Pac-12 and they do start molding, could we start seeing matchups Big 12 After Dark, Big 10 After Dark? That has a nice ring to it, don't it? We've all gotten accustomed to the Pac-12 After Dark. But how many of us really stay up that late to see, Cal versus Washington State or Oregon State versus Arizona State? Not many of us. How many of us would stay up to watch, let's say, Big 10 After Dark? We'll say USC and Nebraska, or USC and Michigan State, or, if Oregon and Washington go to Big 10, Oregon and I'm trying to pick lower brands but still decent brands out of the east side of the Big 10. Let's say Oregon and Wisconsin. That's not bad right there, Oregon and Wisconsin. What about, let's say, Washington and Purdue, or Washington and Penn State? Those are pretty intriguing matchups. And then you flip that over to the Big 12 After Dark, right? Let's say matchups like, Utah versus TCU, Utah versus Texas Tech, Arizona versus Texas Tech. I mean, those are some pretty good matchups. And as long as ESPN has content to fill that time slot, it doesn't matter what the name of the conference is that fills that time slot. It really doesn't matter. And this is my opinion. With ESPN coming out and saying that they're not close to it, to me that tells me that the Pac-12 going out and getting San Diego State, SMU, Colorado State, and a mystery 14, they know they're about to lose some teams. And we know Utah has come out and they're firm on, we don't want to go to the Big 12 no matter what. Well, if ESPN backs out and you're going into a deal that's streaming exclusively and teams are leaving the Pac-12, whether it's to go to the Big 10 or the Big 12, do you continue that stance? Do you continue that stance? And with ESPN out, so we're looking at a media deal that's a combo between Apple and Amazon. And that's extra fees that you have to pay. This isn't like, you already have cable, so it's on, ESPN or ABC or CBS or NBC or whatever. Like, that's an extra fee. Like, you have to go out of your way and buy that. Some people already have Amazon Prime Video. Some people already have Apple TV. That's fine. But I would say, and I think this is a pretty solid guess, a pretty educated guess, that more people, way more people, have linear cable over Apple TV, Amazon Prime. So more people have cable over the Apple TV and Amazon Prime Video, right? So, but then you have to narrow it down even further. How many of the people that don't have or do have these streaming services are interested in the Pac-12? So the people that have Apple TV and Amazon Prime Video, what are the chances are that they're interested in Pac-12 football? If you ask me honestly, most of the time people get those subscriptions for, the extra movies, the extra access to stuff. They don't really get it for football. Would people be willing to pay extra to watch Pac-12 football? That's the question. Now, if If this were the SEC we're talking about, yeah, I think people would be more willing to buy or pay extra fees to watch SEC football. Not sure about Pac-12. And the argument that Utah gave, I understand the academics argument, and I've said that many, many times. I understand. I don't know how that works. Somebody explain that to me. Why do teams say, or universities say, if we jump out of the Pac-12 and into the Big 12, that hurts our academics, our research, our medical side of things, our endowments, our grants? Why? How? And maybe I'm stupid. I don't know. But I don't know how that works. Somebody explain that to me. How does jumping from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 hurt that stuff? I thought it was based on the university, not the conference itself. Now, the Big Ten is a different situation because they share their resources. So whenever you join the Big Ten, you're basically joining a Commonwealth conference. So your resources becomes everybody's resources, and their resources become your resources. So, there's a lot of advantages to joining the Big Ten. For the Pac-12, it's not like that. So why do universities say that? Well, if we go from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, then we're going to lose funding on our research. We're going to lose funding for endowments, grants, all that stuff. Why? Why is that? I'm not saying that's not the case. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I'm asking why. Why do you use that? Why do you lose that stuff? I'm just wondering. It's a question. It's a legitimate question. So the grants are dependent on research at other P10 schools. Then leaving the conference can reduce their fund. If that's a big important question right there. That's a big important question. Utah's research grants, if they are dependent on research at other Pac-12 schools, then leaving the Pac-12 could hurt that. And then people are saying Cal and Stanford. So does Cal and Stanford directly contribute to that, or just having the affiliation to Cal and Stanford help? Like your credibility. Hey, we're in the Pac-12. We're affiliated with Cal and Stanford, and so your funding, gets bumped up, however it is. Or do they actually directly contribute to each other whenever it comes to research? I don't know how the Pac-12 works. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't know how the Pac-12 works. That's why I've never disputed the academics things, the academic side of this, because I don't know much about it. Now, whenever Utah said, it would hurt our NIL side of things, that's where I got to disagree. I have to disagree with that. I have to disagree with that because, like I've stated in several videos, 80% of the viewership in the United States that watches college football is on the eastern side of the United States. So if you join a conference that plays more in the eastern side of the United States, then you're going to get more exposure. More people are going to get interested. You're more of a national brand, so your NIL revenue is going to go up because people want to support that instead of playing teams that nobody hardly ever watches. It's interest that generates the NIL revenue. It's a separate thing than the academics. So I don't agree with the argument. I don't agree with the argument about the NIL. I don't know much about the academics side of things. That's all I'm saying. Now, this tweet that Mark Harlan, the Utah athletic director, put out has gotten dissected so many times it's not even funny. Whenever Dennis Dodd was tweeting about the Big 12 talking to the Four Corners, and the athletic director said, "Give me a break." 4 short words. Give me a break. And it's been dissected. Well, did he mean that Utah's not talking to the Big 12 at all? Does he mean that they've been talking to the Big 12 and they're not interested? Or does it mean that the Big 10 is interested in Utah and therefore the Big 12 is off the table? It could be any of those. But today, and I'll do a video on this tomorrow. I just didn't have time today. But today, the Utah president didn't deny that Utah's been talking to the Big 12. I just want a straight answer. And then there's that video that I made about plausible deniability. And it's not just now a convenient excuse. Presidents and athletic directors have been doing this for a while. They use third parties. They use plausible deniability. That way, no matter what happens, they can always say, I didn't know. That was out of my hands. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't know. That's the direction that I would label that tweet by Mark Harlan, the Utah athletic director. Anyways, Daniel Dixon, thank you for the $5 donation, says, if two other teams jump from the Pac to the Big Ten, would it be possible for ESPN to come to Big Ten for the After Dark program? That's what I'm talking about on this show. Yes, I do think so. And it could be a combo of things, because I think that teams will leave from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, and I also think that teams will leave from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. So we could see both the Big 12 After Dark and the Big 10 After Dark. And both sides of that would be interesting matchups. Like I mentioned earlier, nobody's staying up till, 10 o'clock for kickoff between Cal and Washington State, or Arizona State and Stanford, or Oregon State and Utah, or Colorado and Utah for that matter. But you throw in teams from the Big Ten, like a USC versus a Nebraska, or a USC versus Wisconsin, or a Penn State, whatever. Washington and Oregon join the Big Ten, and you have an Oregon versus a Wisconsin, or an Oregon versus a Nebraska. I would stay up for that. Now, like your Oregon versus Northwestern, Illinois, Rutgers, Maryland, stuff like that, probably not so much. But with Oregon in the matchup, it would still get more viewerships than the viewerships that we would be talking about, in the Pac-12, unless it was a premier matchup. But usually they do the premier matchups for the 7 o'clock kickoff. So you get your leftovers for the 10 o'clock kickoff, or 10:30, whenever it is. So it's a nice mix. And ESPN wouldn't have to devote that After Dark slot to one conference. They could divide it. It could be, a Big 10 After Dark matchup, and then a Big 12 After Dark matchup the next week, where you have like a Utah versus an Oklahoma State, or the Holy War could be a Big 12 After Dark. BYU versus Utah, Arizona versus Texas Tech. That would be a decent one. What if you had a Arizona versus West Virginia? I mean, it's obscure. It's not amazing, but it's interesting. You don't see that every day. So I think that would be better for ESPN, because it would give them more variety for that time slot. That was the biggest issue with ESPN and the Pac-12 After Dark, because they want the better matchups for the 7 p.m. kickoff. So that later slot was almost designated to games that people were like, okay, it's a game. That's about it. Everybody else has played. I guess I might watch that because nothing else is on. But that's it. But if ESPN has a choice week to week, let's see, who has the better matchup this week for our After Dark slot? Is it the Big 10 or the Big 12? This would be perfect for ESPN. This might be one of the reasons why ESPN is working against the Pac-12. And you heard me correctly. I do think that ESPN is working against the Pac-12. And that's one of the reasons why they said today, we're not even close to a TV deal. Because it would work out quite nicely for them, because they would have choices for that After Dark spot. And on top of that, do not forget that the Pac-12 will still exist after this. Streaming only. Maybe ESPN can get a few games out of them as well. I don't know. Like Tier 3, one game a month. I don't know. So that option could still be on the board. But the biggest thing about this is having the option between matchups in the Big 12 and matchups in the Big 10 to fill that After Dark slot and get more viewership instead of your standard, lower level Pac-12 teams playing each other. Now, there was a couple of good ones last year, like USC and Oregon State, but they still didn't get good numbers. Brandon Collins, thank you for the $5 donation, says ACC would be perfect for the After Dark. Already got to deal, and they need to renegotiate with ESPN. ESPN has a time slot that needs to be filled. Yeah, I agree with that. But in order for them to fill that After Dark, it would be they would have to bring in teams from the West Coast in order for that to make sense. It wouldn't make sense for the ACC teams on the East Coast to play each other and be after dark. They would be, because that after dark slot over there on the West Coast, they're kicking off at 6, 7 o'clock, but over here it's after dark because we're 3 or 4 hours later. Pacific, Mountain, Central, yeah, 3-hour difference. Cyclone Steve, thank you for the $2 donation, says no ESPN after dark for the Big Ten. They're a Fox brand, yeah, but ESPN has tier 2 rights to the Big Ten and the Big 12. So Fox would get their big noon kickoff or their 3:30 slot, whichever one they would prefer. And then the Big Ten after dark could be the tier 2 game for ESPN. So Fox has the main tiers for the Big Ten and the Big 12, both of those, I'm pretty sure. But ESPN has tier 2, so they get the leftover games. And, there's going to be some good leftover games that they can choose from, not just from one conference. Like, okay, well, there's not any good leftover games that include the teams on the west side of the Big Ten. Let's look at the Big 12. And then they can choose which one they want. Is that one the better matchup for the after dark slot? Or is that the better matchup for the after dark slot? It's a choice. I mean, that would be a perfect situation for ESPN. And it looks like they might be wanting to work towards that because they're, we're not even close to a TV deal. That's what that tells me. Does the Pac-12 survive if they go streaming only? Is there a way that nobody leaves the Pac-12 if ESPN backs out and there is no linear cable network involved here? I don't see it, but I could be wrong. That's why I'm asking. Can they survive on that? And don't forget, if you go streaming, you do have to pay for your own production costs, from what I understand. MLS has to do it. I think they're streaming exclusively. They have to shell out $60 million a year. I don't know how much each team has to pay because I don't know how many teams are in the MLS. But the estimate for the Pac-12 that I heard is $75 million. Maybe that's not right, and it's a little lower. But anyway you slice it, you'd have to pay for your own production costs, so you'd have to take that out of the deal. So that deal that I heard from somebody that said he had Utah sources as far as San Diego State and SMU getting $25 million apiece, and then the other 10 schools getting $33 million apiece, is that believable? Is that doable? Especially with ESPN saying that they're not close to a TV deal. And how much more? With ESPN saying that, this is another question I want to ask. With ESPN saying that, does that mean that they have to have more extended negotiations? And how long? Because the Pac-12, July of 2024, their current deal is up. So they need to get this done ASAP. And with ESPN saying we're not even close, how long is this thing going to drag out? Man. Sony V, thank you for the $10 donation, says Baylor, Gonzaga, BYU, and TCU are ranked higher academically than Utah, according to U.S. News and World Report. That is correct, and a lot of people have pointed that out. But they still want to use their academics excuse to stay in the Pac-12 because of the funding. Maybe it would affect their funding. I don't know. So that's what I'm saying. I can buy that. But whenever they started using the NIL excuse, I'm like, no. I don't agree with that at all, because they would get way more exposure from the TV viewership audience if they joined a conference that plays more on the eastern side of the United States. And even though the Big 12 only has like 3 teams in the eastern side, well, the rest of the teams are in, central United States, which still gets more viewership than the western side if you're not counting LA. And you can't count LA anymore because USC and UCLA are now in the Big Ten. It hurt the Big Ten tremendously, those guys moving to the Big Ten. And the only thing, seriously, think about this, guys. The only thing that is holding the Pac-12 together right now is Oregon and Washington. How much faith does these teams have in Oregon and Washington signing an extended grant of rights? I'm not talking about the 3-year deal that they're talking about, that we're not signing past 3 years. That's it, because they don't want to have to pay a hefty fine to go to the Big Ten. How much confidence do the rest of these teams have in Oregon and Washington signing an extended grant of rights to keep the Pac-12 together. Because if Oregon and Washington doesn't do that, then the Pac-12 is, their TV deal is going to be even worse the next go around. You lose Oregon and Washington, that's the glue right there. You think this go around was bad? The next go around will be even worse if you lose your two best brands remaining. And that's after you lose USC and UCLA. And like I've said, it really doesn't make sense that the Pac-12 is in this situation, because if you compare the best brands in the Pac-12 versus the best brands in the Big 12, the Pac-12 has the better brands. I mean, there is no brand in the new Big 12, not counting Oklahoma or Texas, that is better than Oregon or Washington. None. None. Now, the rest of the conference is very comparable. But it's having Oregon and Washington that should have given the Pac-12 the advantage. The problem is the Big 12 had a smarter commissioner. He jumped the line. He locked down a deal, got as much of the money as possible that was on the table. It wasn't a lot. It's not anything comparable to the SEC or the Big Ten, but he got as much of it possible, and now the Pac-12 is in this position, and now ESPN is saying we're not close to a deal. So we don't know when this deal is going to happen if ESPN is coming out and saying we're not close. How many timelines have we heard from Pac-12 media? The Pac-12 is supposed to have a meeting on this date. They're supposed to release a statement that they're expanding and grabbing San Diego State, SMU. Every time they've set a date, that date has come and that date has gone. Now I'm hearing that they're going to have a meeting on either tomorrow or Wednesday, all the presidents. They're going to decide what they're going to do. And that there is a deal on the table, even though ESPN came out and said that we're not close to a deal. Maybe they go with streaming exclusively. I don't know. My point is, every time we've heard a date, that date has come and that date has gone, and we've heard nothing. And every day that passes that the TV deal says nothing is another bad day for the Pac-12. The old saying is, no news is good news, right? Well, for the Pac-12, no news from the Pac-12 is actually bad news. There is a lot of negativity going around the Pac-12. If they had something positive to say, I would hope that they would want to, release a press statement or whatever, interview, whatever you want to call it, as soon as possible, and be like, chill out, everybody. We're just fine. And I know I've made a lot of videos about the downfall of the Pac-12. That doesn't mean that I'm rooting for the downfall of the Pac-12. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. That's it. Sonny V, that's what I'm saying. San Diego State and SMU, they just seem like more mouths to feed. Why would they add those two brands? They add absolutely nothing. Oh, it helps with the numbers. Oh, okay. It does get you to 12, but now the rest of your members have to take less because you have to split it with two brands, even though I do think San Diego State's a good brand, so don't misunderstand that. But compared to a Power 5 brand, they don't add to the pie. It's just creating more pieces to the pie. It's creating more mouths to feed. So that's why I've been saying it almost seems like the Pac-12 knows that they're about to lose some members, and that's why they're getting SMU, San Diego State. They're also talking to Colorado State and a mystery fourth member. To me, that tells me that the Pac-12 knows that they're about to lose some members, and they're just trying to fill those spots before they leave. Otherwise, adding those brands, that it doesn't make any sense other than it gets us to 12. So let me get this straight. The 10 teams that are in the Pac-12 right now, they're okay with taking a pay cut just so that the Pac-12 has 12 members. Huh? What? That one doesn't make sense to me. Unless somebody can actually explain that, because my simple brain is not comprehending that. I'm just going to be honest. My simple brain not comprehending that. Why would the 10 teams remaining in the Pac-12 be okay with a pay cut just to say we have 12 members? Yeah, that one doesn't add up to me. That's just me. It doesn't add up to me. So if ESPN is not close to a deal with the Pac-12, does that mean it could mean that they're still negotiating? I'm not saying that ESPN is totally out. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is ESPN said we're not close. So if they're not close, let's say they're still in negotiations, right? How long is this going to take? And when they say they're not close, like, what are we talking about? Like, the Pac-12 wants to approach 35, 40 million, and ESPN is thinking more like 20 million. I don't know. I don't know the number gap. All I know is they're not close. So they could be still in negotiations. How long is that going to take? Because, like I said, every day that goes by that there's no news out of the Pac-12, it's just more bad news. All this is bad news. So let's say that ESPN and the Pac-12 can't come to an agreement, and the Pac-12 has to settle for a streaming-only media deal. If that happens, I do think teams bulk. I really do. I don't see the premier brands staying in a conference where the only way you can watch their games is through streaming devices. I don't see it. So Oregon and Washington going to the Big Ten, that depends on the Big Ten. So could we see Oregon and Washington using the Big 12 as a stepping stool? And all this is assuming that ESPN and the Pac-12 can't work out their deal. All right, so keep that in mind. We're assuming that because they're not even close, they're not going to work it out. All right, that's how we're going down this road. So Oregon and Washington, they see that the media deal for the Pac-12 is going to be streaming only. They're like, that's not going to work. That is not going to work. So they talk to the Big Ten. The Big Ten is like, we're not ready just yet. Okay, we want you, but not right now. Give us some time. Well, Oregon and Washington's like, well, we're not signing a grant of rights to a streaming-only deal. That's not going to happen. So what we'll do is we'll use the Big 12 as a stepping stool. And Brett Yormark and the Big 12 has made it known that they are willing to give Oregon and Washington a TV contract, a TV deal, with an out clause for the Big Ten. That would be perfect for Oregon and Washington if this is the direction that they're going to go. If the Pac-12 can't work it out with ESPN and they are streaming only, Oregon and Washington are like, well, we want to go to the Big Ten, but they don't want us right now. Then they can join the Big 12 if the Big 12 gives them an out clause and there's no buyout, no punishment, and they can just wait out their days in the Big 12 until the Big 10 is ready. That way you get into a better TV deal, you get more exposure, you're going to make more money. It's not just streaming, and once the Big Ten does come calling, there's no buyout. That would be a perfect situation, and it's okay for the Big 12 because they're going to make money off of Oregon and Washington, even if they're only in there for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever. No buyout, no hard feelings. Whenever the Big Ten comes a calling, we understand the situation, and then that attracts. See, you're using Oregon and Washington as bait, okay? Because that attracts these other teams. Well, if Oregon and Washington is going to the Big 12. We want to go to the Big 12. And I don't think that the Big 12 would give the rest of the teams a free out to the Big 10. But if they did, even that's not dumb. You know why? Because they would be confident that the Big 10 wouldn't want the rest of the teams. They know eventually the Big 10 wants Oregon and Washington, so we'll let them go for free. Oregon and Washington coming to the Big 12, that nudges these other teams to come now. We'll give them a free out, expiration date, 5 years. Hey, Utah. Hey, Colorado. Hey, Arizona. Hey, Arizona State, Oregon State, Washington State, whoever. Hey, if the Big Ten comes a calling within 5 years, no harm, no foul, no buyout. If you put an expiration date on it, it's fine. It's okay. You don't have to worry about it. So it's really not as dumb as people think it is, because you're counting on the fact that the Big Ten isn't going to want these teams in the next 5 years, and I would agree with that. If the Big Ten doesn't want the rest of those teams in the next 5 years, then they're not going to want them. Oregon and Washington, that's a different story. But you use Oregon and Washington as bait. You know that the Big Ten does want Oregon and Washington. That's fine. But you get the rest of these teams to come. You give them the same deal because you want to seem fair, knowing that they're not going to want you. They are going to want Oregon and Washington. But you know what? We landed you guys because of Oregon and Washington. Use them as the bait. Whenever the Big Ten calls them, that's fine. And you still have the other schools because the Big Ten doesn't call the other schools up. I'm okay with that. I understand it. I know that's taking a chance, but it's a calculated risk. And I do think that risk pays off. Even if you only retain 2 of those teams, that's still 2 more. That's still 2 Power 5 brands. I think that's a good deal. So I'm okay with that, and I understand that. But that all hinges on if ESPN and the Pac-12 can't work it out. And, it's one thing. Think about this real quick. It's one thing if the Pac-12 and ESPN aren't close. That's one thing, behind closed doors. They know it. Nobody else knows it, right? But it's another thing for ESPN to actually come out and say it. ESPN let people know we're not even close. See what I'm saying? It's one thing for them to know it and the Pac-12 to know it. Behind closed doors, hey, we're going to try to work this out. But it's another thing for ESPN to let everybody know. Like, to me, that's almost like a statement like, we're not even close, guys. I'm not sure if it's going to work out. I really don't, because we're not seeing the value in the Pac-12 anymore. We're invested in the SEC heavily. We have a great deal with the ACC. We have them locked down, the grant of rights, screwing all over those teams. Eventually, we're going to take a few of those teams in the SEC. We got Tier 2 rights with Big 12 and Big 10. We're good to go. We don't need the Pac-12. I mean, if they want to accept our low ball offer, we're fine with that. But we're not coming up any further. That's what it seems like to me. That's the statement that, from the outside looking in, looks like that ESPN is trying to make. That's not good for the Pac-12. If this turns out to be a streaming only deal, a lot of teams are going to jump. That's the bottom. That's the bottom line. If that's the case, now maybe negotiations continue and eventually ESPN and the Pac-12 can close the gap and they can agree on something. That's a different story. But if they can't, and this turns into a streaming only deal, oh my gosh, I don't see it. And I do believe that Oregon and Washington would bolt to the Big 12 for a stepping stone if the Big 10 didn't want them right off the bat. Now, I have also heard that the Big 10 might be interested in Oregon and Washington, taking them at a reduced revenue share. The amount that I heard was around $40 million per team. If that's the case, I think Oregon and Washington would take that fast, especially if they're headed down the road of all streaming, no cable. Okay? All this is pointing in the direction of almost encouraging teams to leave the Pac-12. Can ESPN be doing that? And if you think about it, you couldn't really prove it. It would just be like, our negotiations were just that far off. They wanted this. We were offering that. They weren't budging. We weren't budging. It is what it is. And, things just worked out for us, because like I said earlier, having choices between games in the Big 12 after dark and games in the Big 10 after dark, that gives ESPN more choices for that after dark content, because that argument of, oh no, ESPN needs the Pac-12 because of that after dark slot. It doesn't matter if they're in the Pac-12 or if they're in the Big 10 or if they're in the Big 12. As long as they can fill that time slot, that's all that matters. And on top of that, you give them choices. We don't like that matchup this week in the Big 12 for the after dark, but that matchup in the Big 10, then next week, nothing really interests us for that after dark in the Big 10. We got something over here in the Big 12. If some teams from the Pac-12 go to the Big 10 and some teams go from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, if you really think about it, that makes a lot of sense for ESPN. It would make sense for ESPN to want that to happen because they want more viewership. They want to make more money. And if they can get the Pac-12 at a super low price, fine. All right, you're going to make a little bit of money. But if the Pac-12 doesn't come off their number and ESPN is like, we're out, and the rest of those teams now have a decision, okay, so we're looking at a deal, a media deal that's streaming only. Don't like that at all. Yeah, we got to get out of here, guys. This is not going to... Who thinks... And listen, I understand that Deion Sanders does not make the decisions. I understand that, okay? He does not make the decisions for Colorado. Let me be clear about that. But having said that, who thinks that Deion Sanders is going to be thrilled if the option is for Colorado to sign a media deal for streaming only? He's like, this is why I became the head coach. Guys, nobody told me anything about streaming only, so we'll be playing in front of streaming only. Really? I think that decision by Colorado was to make their athletics more attractive and to show other conferences, hey, we're investing into our athletics. I think Colorado to the Big 12 is makes the most sense for both sides. Out of any team to any conference, I think Colorado back to the Big 12 makes the most sense for both sides of the issue because Colorado has been in the Big 12. Colorado, they still have some decent rivalries for the remaining teams of the Big 12. And on top of that, now there's teams in the East time zone that would give Colorado more exposure as well. And if the Pac-12 is looking at streaming only, well, if you join the Big 12, you're going to be playing on Fox or ESPN. Not every week. It's not guaranteed that your game is going to be televised on linear cable. But the ESPN channels, yeah, you're going to get a spot on something if you join the Big 12. Sometimes you'll get that big noon kickoff. You talk about exposure. If Colorado got a big noon kickoff, they would get more exposure out of that than any of the games that they've ever played in the Pac-12, just because of the time slot. Now, might mess up their internal clocks because depending on where they're playing, it's going to be an hour. Well, you actually gain an hour, but going back to Colorado, you would lose that hour. So there would be some adjusting for the time zones, but it does seem like that both the Big 12 and the Big 10 want those time zones. The Big 10 has all but one time zone, and that's the Mountain time zone. The Big 12, they have all but one time zone, and that's the Pacific time zone. Keep this in mind. Fox has Tier 1 rights for both the Big 10 and the Big 12. So it would make sense for Fox to want the Big 10 to go after Utah. That gives them, the Mountain time zone, so they have all four time zones. And to try to get the Big 12 to lock down the Arizona schools, I know you're not technically locking down the Pacific time zone, but since they don't have daylight savings time, they are on Pacific time zone up through November. So for the vast majority of the regular season of college football, you do have the Pacific time zone. So that would be, Fox would have the Tier 1 rights to two conferences, not just one, two conferences that have spots in all four time zones. Because like I said in one of my videos that I put out this past week, it's not just the conferences that makes these decisions. The networks have a big say in it. Whether you believe it or not, the networks have a big say in it. And the example that I've used time and time again is the first go-around, the SEC was looking at Texas A&M, Missouri, and West Virginia. And the SEC was leaning towards Texas A&M for sure, but then West Virginia. Then ESPN was like, nope. No. ESPN was like, we want that Kansas City and St. Louis TV market. Give us Missouri. And so the SEC got Missouri. Now, the SEC got their favorite choice in Texas A&M, but then the remaining choice, ESPN got their favorite choice. They wanted Missouri over West Virginia. And that's the direction that it went. So do not underestimate the power that these networks have behind the scenes as far as who these conferences are going to pick up next. That is a big deal. It is a big factor, and you have to factor that in whenever you're trying to figure out, if teams do jump from the Pac-12, where are they going to go? It makes sense for Utah to join the Big 12 because, they have the rivalry, the in-state rivalry with BYU. They're right there. It's not that big of a stretch, but Fox might be in the ear of the Big Ten, and it doesn't have to be Utah. It could be Colorado too. Colorado's in that Mountain Time zone, so they could be like, we want. And somebody left a comment in one of my videos, and it's going to be a Get It Gang video. I started editing it. I just ran out of time, so I'm going to put it out tomorrow. But they suggested, what if it's Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado to the Big Ten? That's interesting because you're getting the two best brands that everybody's been talking about, right? Oregon and Washington, and then you're adding that Mountain Time Zone, which is the only missing time zone for the Big Ten. So when you really think about it, it's not that big of a stretch. And the Big Ten could offer all four of those reduced revenue shares, and they would still make way more than what they're going to make in the Pac-12. And on top of that, they would get way more exposure than what they would ever get from the Pac-12. Make no mistake about it. USC and UCLA left the Pac-12 for the Big Ten because of the money and the shared resources and the commonwealth of the Big Ten. But another contributing factor is exposure. They're going to get more time slots in the population area that watches more college football. In other words, the central to eastern part of the United States, which holds that 80% of the American population that watches college football. So they're going to get the exposure. So you have to factor that in on all of these teams. Utah, Colorado, if they join the Big 12, they're going to get more exposure than what they would in the Pac-12. But then there's the academic side of things. And Utah has come out and said, we don't want to join the Big 12 because of the academic stuff. We would lose funding and all that stuff. I don't know how that works. So people tried to explain it to me in the comments. I'll have to look into it a little bit more because right now I'm still guessing. But for the athletic side of things, it's definitely a no-brainer. It's definitely a no-brainer. Utah's Big 12 would make way more sense than the Pac-12 as far as more exposure for the brand, more NIL revenue because, more people would be watching and more people would be supporting it. And so for the athletic side of things, it's a no-brainer. Utah to the Big 12 makes a lot of sense. It's just the academic side of things. Same for Colorado, but I think Colorado makes even more sense than Utah because their research funding isn't as dependent because they don't get as much. They don't stand as much to lose as Utah does. Now, don't get me wrong; they're a great research university, so that does factor in. But it's not quite as much as Utah. And don't forget, they just hired Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is going to want his teams to get as much TV exposure as possible. And with ESPN saying we're not close to a deal yet with the Pac-12, the Pac-12 could be headed in the direction of streaming exclusively. At bare minimum, heavy streaming. I mean, they're already looking at that. But if ESPN backs out of these negotiations, it is streaming only, and I really just don't think that that's going to set well with a lot of teams. I still think there's some teams that would be okay with it. I think as long as the Pac-12 simply exists, that Stanford and Cal would be okay with that. Unless the Big Ten wants them, they would go to the Big Ten. I think Oregon State and Washington State might be okay with that as long as the majority of the Pac-12 stays. Not sure about Arizona State. I know they've been kind of firm on supporting the Pac-12, but if it goes streaming exclusively, I don't know how they would feel about that. I know Arizona is actually they're leaning in the direction of the Big 12 right now. So if it went streaming exclusively, that would be like the violent shove as far as, okay, we were definitely thinking about doing it. Now we're 100% doing it. I think that's the same situation with Colorado. Utah is a big question mark, and I think with Utah, it would just depend on if they think they have any shot of joining the Big Ten. That's what I think. Because you got to realize Utah just won the Pac-12 2 years in a row. They've expanded their stadium since joining the Pac-12. They do have a decent NIL program, so they have shown that they do care about their athletics. So would they be okay with their athletics being in a conference where the only way to watch your football and basketball games is through streaming? That's a difficult decision that only Utah can make. I don't know, and I'm not sure about the rumor that I heard from somebody I know that says he has sources close to Utah saying that San Diego State and SMU are going to receive 25. But this is assuming that ESPN is still a part of the deal. And this person is still being adamant that ESPN is still a part of this deal and is saying that SMU and San Diego State are going to get $25 million and that the other 10 schools are going to get $33 million. I'm just, that would be, if that actually happened, I would be very, very surprised, especially with ESPN coming out today and saying, we're not even close. So what kind of stunt could ESPN be trying to pull if they're saying we're not close to having a deal with the Pac-12, but then this person is hearing, I didn't see any names. No names were listed. He just said people he knows that's close to the Utah situation saying, San Diego State, SMU getting $25 million and the rest getting $33 million. It just something. One of those is well, it doesn't make sense when you put it together. You can't have a deal that factors in ESPN if ESPN is saying we're not close to a deal. Why would ESPN say that? Are they trying to trick us? We're just playing a joke. We actually do have a deal with Pac-12. We're just kidding. We're close enough to April Fools. Just kidding. National prank. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So, if they're coming out and saying they're not close to a deal, then how would there be a deal offered that factors in ESPN? It does. I don't know. And Hank says, GBD, I can't see those numbers without the LA mark. That's what I'm saying. It just, especially when you're adding, when it looks like the Pac-12 is trying to add brands, that's not going to add to the pie. It just creates more slices. This is crazy. This is probably the craziest roller coaster of a conference realignment situation I have ever seen. I mean, I'm hearing people accusing Dennis Dodd, myself, 365 Sports, 247, CBS Sports, accusing everybody that says anything that hints at anybody leaving the Pac-12 of us being in the back pocket of the Pac-12. Like, this is how crazy this has gotten. Craziness. And people are getting mad. People are taking things personal. And I've never seen conference realignment divide people the way that this has divided. Because whenever it was the other way around, and people were talking about whenever it was announced that Oklahoma and Texas were leaving the SEC, were leaving the Big 12 for the SEC, and then people were having these similar conversations about the Big 12. Oh, it looks like the Big 12 is going to get picked apart. Big 12 is on its dying days, and I made videos about it. Everybody made videos about it, and I didn't see anything remotely close to the the personal attacks. I am seeing personal attacks left and right about, it's not just the previous conference realignment discussions that I've been a part of. It's about agreeing and disagreeing. This is about, you're a moron if you don't agree with me. That's what I'm seeing. I'm not trying to label, but it's mostly on the Pac-12 side. Like on the Pac-12 side, most, not all, I don't want to lump everybody in there, but most of the people that are supporting the fact that the Pac-12 isn't going anywhere, that nobody's leaving the Pac-12, which could be true. I'm not calling anybody idiots, all right? Anything can happen. There is no such thing as a sure thing until it actually happens. But from what I'm seeing, the people that are supporting the Pac-12 and saying nobody's leaving, to the other side that's like, no, I think there's a chance. In fact, I think teams are, you're a moron. Like there's a lot of, I've never seen anything like it. And I've had people turn on me that I never thought would turn on me. And it's just, it's mind blowing. It really is. It really is mind blowing. And you know, going unbloated, if you believe any of these rumors that any team could leave the Pac-12, you're an idiot. You can't think for yourself. You're just believing all these people that are in the back pockets of the Big 12. Well, no. I'm going by, you know, a lot of people are saying a lot of things, and I just make videos on that stuff. I'm not saying that I believe any of it because I don't know what to believe. I really don't. Whatever happens is going to happen. But my job, y'all need to understand this. My job as a YouTuber is to create content. And right now, the content circles the Pac-12. Okay? So that's my job. We'll see what actually happens. Nothing would surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if the Pac-12 stays intact, they get a decent TV deal, they expand, they're good to go. Somehow they convince Oregon and Washington to sign an extended grant of rights, and they're okay. And all this was just a show. That's fine. I'm okay with it. I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon and Washington left for the Big 10, some teams left for the Big 12, but still a large chunk of the Pac-12 stays intact. They backfill, and they continue to be a Power 5 conference. That wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if ESPN backs out of this deal altogether, and now they're going 100% streaming, and now you're seeing a mass exodus, and the Pac-12 gets its Autonomous 5 or Power 5 status ripped off because they lost the vast majority of the teams that were Power 5 that signed the previous TV deal. None of the scenarios would surprise me. That's why I'm not predicting, because I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm not over here calling anybody an idiot. Oh, you believe that the Pac-12 is going to stay together? What are you thinking, dummy? No, it's possible. Or, man, you think even one team's going to leave the Pac-12? You're falling for it. You're a moron. No, because nobody knows. John Teal, thank you for the $2 donation, says, the difference is Big 12 is kicking the Pac when it's down. Well, same goes for whenever the Big 12 was down. Wasn't people kicking the Big 12 when it was down too? Yeah, including myself. Guilty. I was doing it too. Whenever the Big 12 lost Texas and Oklahoma, and everybody's like, the Big 12 ain't surviving this. This is fin finito, the end. They're done. And I was like, yep, it looks like it. I don't see how they can survive it. And then I had, the case in point, what I've been talking about. So I had people that were really, really, really close to the ACC situation. I'm talking like coaching staff close, all right? And they were telling me, yeah, ACC is going after West Virginia, Notre Dame. It's going to happen. They even gave me a timeline. I'm like, all right, great story. I'm going to run with it. Those videos got a lot of views. But guess what? It didn't happen. And people still remind me about it. And I'm okay with it. I understand. What I'm saying is I learned my lesson. There is no such thing as a sure thing until it actually happens. Even if you think you have a source that beats all sources. And I thought I did. And it still surprises me that those people were wrong. To this day, it blows my mind. That's how sure I was. But I learned my lesson. I did. John Taylor, thank you for the $2 donation, says, when the Big 12 was down, we didn't take teams. Huh? Well, conferences were trying to take teams, but the Big 12 countered by getting BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, UCF. It was confirmed that the ACC was talking to West Virginia. That was confirmed. So, yeah, conferences were trying to take teams from the Big 12, but the Big 12 survived that. And that's what I'm saying with this situation. It could be that conferences simply are trying to get teams from the Pac-12 and they don't succeed. But they could succeed. That's what I'm saying. We don't know. Everybody thinks that they have the sure thing. Man, I have the source of all sources. I have a sure thing. I know what's going to happen. No, you don't. Nobody knows what's going to happen until it actually happens. I'm telling you right now. I learned my lesson on that. James McKenzie, thank you for the $5 donation, says, if the Pac-12 loses UW in Oregon, the Big Ten gets its West, and Fox could steal the After Dark spot from ESPN, and that's what I've been talking about. 100% agree. And that could be a battle between Fox and ESPN as well. That's a good point. I didn't think about that. But either way, I don't know how that goes. I don't know if that's possible for Fox to grab that spot. I don't know the relationships between where these networks want those spots and what the actual conferences want. I don't know. They have to work it out for themselves. Yeah, that's definitely possible. But I would think that Fox wants that big noon kickoff and the prime time. And that way, because let's be honest, okay? The After Dark slot doesn't get a lot of views. It doesn't. It gets decent views, but you compare it to the noon and the prime time, it's not the same. But if you have the right matchups in that spot, you can maximize it. And you can get more views than what you did before. So with ESPN, with the Pac-12 After Dark, there's only so many second-tier matchups you can put in there. You're not going to put your primetime matchups, your best matchups in Pac-12 After Dark. So people are watching Washington State, Oregon State. I mean, two decent teams, but it's not going to attract a national audience. No. Cal and Arizona. No. Arizona State, Colorado. No. UCLA, Oregon State. No. But if Oregon and Washington go to the Big Ten, and let's say the four quarters go to the Big 12, then ESPN can be like, all right, do we want Oregon and Wisconsin in that Pac-10 After Dark, or do we want BYU and Utah in the Big 12 After Dark? Either way, that time slot's going to be filled. Now they have choices on what game they want to be putting in that time slot instead of just getting the lower tier Pac-12 games. So I think this could work out really good with ESPN if it goes down that road. But then again, ESPN and Pac-12 could continue negotiations and they get closer on the number and they agree, and the Pac-12 After Dark lives to see another day. We don't know what's going to happen. It could still be Pac-12 After Dark, ESPN and Pac-12 figure it out, or they don't figure it out and these teams start bolting because they're looking at a media deal that's streaming only. And then ESPN's like, well, that worked out anyways because now we have a choice. We can see if we have the better game for that spot in the Big Ten, or if the better game is over in the Big 12 this week. And 1 week it can be the Big 10, the other week the Big 12. And they can just pick the best game available for that time spot. Options are always good. Choices are always good. The more choices you have to fill those slots, instead of having to fall back, well, I guess we have to put Cal and Oregon State in that spot. We don't have a choice. We've got our prime time over here, and that's not going to work out. So instead of that, you actually have choices, and you'll have better matchups, and ESPN could actually draw in better viewership for that After Dark slot and make a lot more money. And right now, ESPN needs to make the most money possible because they're not in a good financial situation. They're about to fire some employees, and from the article that I saw today, they basically said, and I don't know what positions this covers, but they basically said everybody is vulnerable. So I mean that doesn't sound good at all. I'll do a video on that as well. So yeah, ESPN is trying to figure out how to spend the least amount of money while making the most amount of money. So think about this: if ESPN backs out of this deal, or they can't come up with a good agreement, right? And they're like, it's not going to work. So that's step one. You're spending less. Well, you're spending nothing on the Pac-12. You back out. These teams start bolting because they don't want to be a part of a conference that's streaming only, all right? So you got big brands going to the Big Ten and some decent brands going to the Big 12. So you're spending nothing on the Pac-12. You solve that problem. Then the second thing, you're making more money on the time slot you already have because you have more choices. You can put the best choice you have instead of having to put out whatever. So, I mean, it seems like it would be a win-win for ESPN. I'm just saying. It's what it seems like. But like I've said, we'll see what actually happens. But it's a big deal that ESPN came out and said they're not close because a lot of people were thinking that there was a deal on the table and that the three networks involved was ESPN, Amazon Prime Video, and Apple TV. So you pull out ESPN, and that's streaming exclusively. And I am sure that there's at least a few teams, not the entire Pac-12, but there's at least a few teams that are going to be like, that's not going to, no, we're not okay with that. We got to leave. This is getting ridiculous. So if that's the case, and they can't come to an agreement, I fully expect the Pac-12 to lose some teams. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe they can come to an agreement and some teams stay. As far as the deal that I heard from somebody that said he knew sources inside Utah saying that San Diego State, SMU getting $25 million, which, by the way, it was weird because this person did not mention Colorado State, who's been rumored to talk to the Big 12, and didn't mention the mystery fourth team. So is that off the board? I don't know. But saying that San Diego State and SMU get $25 million, and then the rest of the Pac-12 get $33 million. I'm just trying to figure out where that money's coming from because even if ESPN is, does figure it out, I don't see them shelling out that much money for the Pac-12. I mean, the Pac-12 After Dark isn't that valuable. It's not. It really isn't. And ESPN is looking to cut corners. So I don't see that particular figure. I'm not disagreeing that it's not possible that the Pac-12 stays together. It absolutely is. But I have to disagree with that figure. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. John Taylor, thank you for the $2 donation, says ESPN would have nothing west of the Mississippi. What are you talking about? They have Tier 2 rights of Big 12 and Big 10. So if Oregon and Washington joined the Big 10, then they could fill the After Dark slot with, Oregon versus whoever out of the Big 10, Washington versus whoever, USC versus whoever, UCLA. And then if the Four Corners join the Big 12, you still have the Mountain Time Zone, which you could still fill the Pac-12 After Dark. We've seen Arizona matchups plenty of times in that Pac-12 After Dark. So, you can see an Arizona versus Texas Tech in Big 12 After Dark. They would absolutely have teams in that time slot. Matt Ritson, thank you for the $4.99 donation, says, how come UCLA leave for big money, not academics, where other Pac-12 presidents keep other schools just want academics and for not sports only? Well, I mean, the Big Ten is an academic prestigious conference, so I do think academics were involved, but I do see what you're saying. Like these, well, I say these universities, but it really comes down to Utah. Utah is using the excuse of academics as far as, hey, we're not going to the Big 12. That would hurt our research funding and our academics. So I don't know. And it's all going to come out in the wash, and we'll see who stays and who goes. And yes, Jeffrey Thompson, that is correct. UCLA definitely did need the money because they were in some debt. So yeah, they definitely want to make that. They're going to make way more money in the Big Ten than what they ever could in the Pac-12. And you better believe if the Big Ten throws a lifeline to Oregon and Washington, they're going to take it, guys. I don't know what else to tell you. They're going to take it. Anyways, we're going to wrap this up. Tomorrow is a school day, unfortunately. I had a good time. Hopefully you had a good time. I know. I didn't clear up a daggum thing, but that's just the way it is right now with the Pac-12. We learn something new every day, but yet we're not one step closer to knowing what's actually going to happen, because there's still people on both sides of this that are saying, don't believe them. They're just part of the Big 12 propaganda. And then the other side is going like, nope, Pac-12's dying. So you're like, who do I believe? Well, we'll find out soon. But in the meantime, I'll keep you up to date on the latest news, rumors, and speculation, because that is what I do. And Golden Blue Dude is having a great month, especially for an off season. I am completely blown away by everybody's support. So if you're new to the channel and you're not subscribed, try us out. Hit that subscribe button. It's easy, simple, fast, and free. And y'all make sure to hit the like button on the way out of here. Even if you're watching the replay of this, you weren't able to catch us live, we would greatly appreciate it if you hit the like button on the way out. That's what really helps these live shows get the views. Appreciate it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed yourselves. We will be back tomorrow, of course, 10 p.m. So be back here. We'll find out what else happens tomorrow, because this is a day-to-day thing. So we'll see what happens tomorrow, and I will keep you guys up to date on what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. But as of right now, Monday evening, Golden Blue Dude is out.